The 19 Deception. The Final Testament advises, quote, any reader of this book can easily verify the Quran's mathematical miracle, end of quote. And also, quote, all you need is to hear the literal and the numeral units of the Quran are designed according to a mathematical system based on code 19. If you do your research objectively, with a critical mind, you will discover many features that already have been discovered and witnessed by many. End of quote. I have taken up this challenge and examined this claim critically and objectively. The Quranists claim that, quote, 19 is the common denominator throughout the Quran's mathematical system, end of quote. What this means is that the number of Arabic letters and the words in the Quran are all multiples of and divisible by the number 19. Appendix 1 of the Final Testament states under the title A Strong Foundation, quote, Basmala consists of 19 Arabic letters. The Basmala is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This brings us to the abjad system, which is an ancient practice of giving each Arabic letter a numerical value, which Khalifa calls geometrical values in Appendix 1. Please note that this numerological system is pre-Islamic and has no place in Islam. Since Quranists reject history, where is the proof from the Quran to accept and utilize this number code from the period of Jahiliyyah? This is yet another example of Quranists going outside the Quran to substantiate their beliefs. The hypocrisy is quite glaring. The reformist translation uses the abjad system to prove the miraculous nature of 19 by adding the numerical values of the first two ayat of Surah Al-Muddathir. They claim that 1974 is very significant because Rashid Khalifa discovered 19 as the code of the Quran in that year. We shall return to Surah Al-Muddathir later in this video. Now, looking at the Basmala and applying the abjad system to every letter, we find that Bismi has a total value of 102, Allah has 66, Ar-Rahman has 329, and Ar-Rahim has 289. Please note that the abjad system only counts actual letters and does not take into account how the words are pronounced in the sentence. So a letter with shadda is counted as only one letter. Therefore, the grand total of the Basmala is 786. However, when we divide this by 19, we discover that 786 is not divisible by 19. So the code fails. Another ayah which they claim proves their 19 hypothesis is Surah Al-Muddathir, ayah 30, which says, quote, over it are 19, end of quote. However, in the very next ayah, Allah tells us that this is in reference to the 19 angels who guard the hellfire. Allah says, quote, and we have not made the keepers of the fire except angels, end of quote. Interestingly, Allah tells us about the number 19, quote, and we have specified their number as a trial for the disbelievers, end of quote. Quranists claim that this means that Muslims are disbelievers because we do not believe in 19 as the code of the Quran. However, they need to reflect on the fact that it is they who are being tested by this number, leading them to remove ayat from the Quran and to manufacture lies to defend it. Muslims are not the ones being tested because of it. Looking closely at the first two ayat of Surah Al-Muddathir, which reads, Ya ayyuhal muddathir, O you enveloped in garments. and applying the abjad system to the three words of the first ayah, we get the subtotals of 11, 17, and 775 as shown here. Ayah 2 reads, fa'anzir, arise and warn. Here the first word has a total of 140 and the second word of 1031. Adding all the subtotals of both ayah, we arrive at 1974 or 1974, which is also the same number calculated by Yüksel in his reformist translation, which I alluded to earlier. Dividing the total value of ayah 1, which was 803, by 19, it is not divisible. No is the total value of ayah 2, which was 1171. More interestingly, even the grand total of 1974, which is very significant to Quranists and their beliefs, is not divisible by 19. Thus, the code spectacularly fails. I decided to further test the code in some short surahs by counting all the letters in each surah as well as adding the abjad values. This was done with and without the basmala letters and abjad values to see if their totals were divisible by 19. I began with Surah Al-Kawthar, the shortest surah of the Quran. None of the three verses had abjad values that were divisible by 19. The total number of letters is 43, which is also not divisible by 19, and this is with and without adding the letters of the basmala. This is the same with the total abjad values of all three verses separately and together, again with and without the basmala's abjad values. All these figures are not divisible by 19. Next was Surah Al-Ikhlas, one of the most important surahs, which explains who Allah is. So if there was a surah which needed to have the code in it, it has to be this surah. However, it has a total of 47 letters, which is not divisible by 19. The first ayah has an abjad value of 220, the second ayah of 231, the third ayah of 240, and the fourth ayah of 310. None of these are divisible by 19. This was also true with and without adding the basmala to the equation. Therefore, the code fails miserably. Then I calculated Surah Al-Falaq, which has a total of 71 letters. Again, this is not divisible by 19. The abjad values of each ayah is not divisible by 19, nor are there abjad values, whether with or without the basmala, was not divisible by 19. So again, the code failed. Finally, Surah An-Nas has a total of 80 letters, which is not divisible by 19, and neither were the abjad values of each ayah. This was also true of the total abjad values, with and without the basmala. None of these were divisible by 19. Thus, the code failed yet again. I concluded that if the code cannot work on short surahs, they will definitely not work with larger ones. This code is a deception and a lie, which is promoted and believed by the Quran corruptors to deceive people into believing that they have this special knowledge, which means they are rightly guided. This is far from the truth.